The planet Kethra was as desolate as it seemed, an outpost on the edge of the galaxy. Its barren landscape of cracked, dry earth held no promise of a future, only the weight of forgotten history. Kian, a scavenger by trade, had spent years wandering the world's ruins, collecting scraps to sell to passing traders. But when his latest expedition took him deeper into the forgotten caverns beneath the surface, he discovered something far more valuable than he could have imagined. The ancient vault he stumbled upon was hidden beneath layers of debris, its entrance almost impossible to detect. It was an old, heavily shielded structure, something built long before Kethra had become the lifeless world it was today. Kian's heart raced as he cracked the final codes to open the vault's door, an archaic sequence buried in old texts he'd scavenged over the years. The door slid open with a creak, revealing a holographic console flickering to life. The air smelled of aged metal and dust, but as the interface glowed, a strange energy pulsed from it. On the console's surface, an image of Earth, the once proud cradle of humanity, appeared, its distant blue oceans and green lands a stark contrast to the empty, fragmented galaxy Kian knew. The figure that emerged from the hologram was a regal woman, her eyes piercing with the weight of millennia. She spoke in a language that Kian could not immediately understand, the words harsh and foreign to his ears. But as the machine connected to the universal translator embedded in his ear, the message became clear. I am Empress Solara, the last monarch of Earth. If you are seeing this message, then the time has come. The legacy of the human empire is not lost, and the stars must be united once again under our banner. Find my hair and restore what was once ours. Kian froze, heart pounding. A message from the past, from a time when Earth ruled the galaxy, when humanity stood tall above the stars. His hands trembled as the hologram continued, a warning that set off an urgent alarm in his mind. A faction grows, one that wishes to erase the memory of humanity's rule. They will do anything to stop my bloodline from returning. You must act swiftly. Before the message could continue, a sudden burst of static scrambled the transmission. The image flickered and then vanished entirely. But the words remained burned into Kian's mind. Earth's monarchy, the lost empire, was real, and a return to power could be imminent. But who would come to claim the throne? Kian didn't have time to think. From outside the vault, the distant rumble of ships' engines vibrated through the walls. He wasn't alone. Someone else had detected the signal, and they would be coming for him, coming for the relic. His pulse quickened as he grabbed the data crystal that held the message and stuffed it into his bag. There was no turning back now. His instincts screamed at him to flee, but Kian hesitated, gazing one last time at the vault. There was no mistake. This was bigger than anything he had ever encountered. A lost monarch, a galaxy united under Earth's banner. A return that could change the entire balance of power. As the rumbling grew louder, Kian bolted from the vault, the sound of approaching ships now deafening. His mind raced. Who would dare to take such a risk to uncover this relic? And why hadn't anyone acted sooner? Kian didn't know the answers, but one thing was clear. The forgotten monarch's return had begun, and Earth was about to wake up. Kian's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the caverns, the echo of his footsteps drowned out by the distant hum of approaching engines. The vault was deep within the planet's crust, but even the thick stone walls couldn't block the sense of urgency creeping up his spine. Someone was coming, and it wasn't just any ordinary group. The ships that had landed above Kethra were not the typical traders or scavengers. He could feel the difference. This was something more dangerous, more calculated. As Kian emerged from the dark tunnel into the open, the sunless sky of Kethra greeted him, a dim red-orange glow casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. The remnants of a forgotten world lay scattered before him, crumbling ruins, shattered structures, and lifeless machinery once used by humanity. His breath was ragged, his legs burning, but he couldn't afford to stop. He had to get the message out, Get it to someone who could make sense of it. The relic he had uncovered wasn't just valuable. It was the key to a war no one had been prepared for. Kian stumbled into the nearest settlement, a cluster of poorly constructed huts and makeshift shacks where scavengers and traders came and went, far from the watchful eyes of the galactic powers. It was a place where secrets were traded, and nobody asked too many questions. But even here, he could sense the shift in the air. The tension was palpable. Whispers of strange ships circling the planet had already begun to spread. He headed straight for the data shack, a tiny building that served as a communication hub for the local network. The old man who ran the place, Jarek, was a tech-savvy recluse with a reputation for knowing how to keep things off the radar. Can slammed the door open, nearly knocking it off its hinges. Jarek looked up from his console, a tired, grizzled face framed by the glow of various holoscreens. "Not the best time for a visit, Kian," Jarek grunted, his voice raspy. "Got a bit of a situation outside. Sounds like a couple of bounty hunters moving in." "I got something more important than that," Kian said, breathless. He threw the data crystal on the desk between them. This is why they're coming." Jarek's eyes narrowed. Without a word, he plugged the crystal into his terminal. A hologram flickered to life. A pale blue image of Empress Solara, her regal form standing tall in a command room adorned with ancient Earth symbols. The image was cracked and faded, but the message it carried was unmistakable. Jarek's hands froze over the console as the words began to echo through the small room. "This is Earth's last monarch, Empress Solara. If you are seeing this, then the time has come to restore humanity's rightful place in the stars." The gravity of the message hit them both at once. Jarek's lips parted in shock, but before he could react, a low thrum vibrated through the walls. The signal was strong now. Something far larger was on its way. Kian's eyes darted toward the screen, where a new message began to play, this one far more urgent. "We've already seen the signs. The enemies of Earth's legacy are waking. They will stop at nothing to prevent the return of the monarchy. Whoever holds this message has just become a target. You must move swiftly." Kian turned to Jarek, his voice tight with urgency. "They're coming for this. For her." The door to the shack slammed open with a crash, and Kian's worst fears were confirmed. Two men, heavily armed and wearing the insignia of the Galactic Council, stepped into the room, their expressions cold and unwavering. The larger of the two grinned as he surveyed the surroundings. "Well, well," he said, his voice low and menacing. "What do we have here?" "The last vestige of Earth's foolish hopes." Kian's pulse raced, his mind scrambling for a plan. The men's weapons were drawn, but they hadn't fired yet. There was still a chance. Jarek's hand shot to the console, scrambling to erase the data, but the leader of the mercenaries stepped forward and slammed a boot onto the terminal. The screen flickered and died instantly. Kian reached for a blaster stashed beneath his coat. "If you want it, you'll have to take it from me." The mercenaries smirked. "We've been authorized to eliminate you and anyone else who knows about this signal. The Galactic Council doesn't take kindly to upstarts claiming royal blood." Before Kian could respond, the air was pierced by a blinding flash of light, followed by a thunderous explosion. A new ship, sleek, fast, and unmistakably human, dropped out of the sky, firing on the mercenaries before they had a chance to react. The force of the blast sent Kian and Jarek sprawling, but when the smoke cleared, the mercenaries were gone, and the strange ship hovered overhead. The hatch opened, and a voice echoed from the speakers above. "You're not alone anymore, Kian. The heir has been found." Kian struggled to his feet, dusting himself off as he watched the ship's hatch slowly open. The silhouette that emerged was a woman, tall, poised, and with an air of command that made even the hardened scavenger pause. Her features were sharp, but there was a softness in her eyes, an unmistakable humanity that drew Kian's attention. She wore a black jumpsuit marked with a symbol he didn't recognize, an emblem of a lion's head, crowned with stars. "We're not here to cause trouble," the woman said, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. "We've been watching the signal. It's time we meet the person who activated it." Cain stood still for a moment, unsure whether to trust her. The blast from the ship had wiped out the mercenaries in seconds, and there was no doubt they had just been saved by whoever was on board. But that didn't mean he was about to blindly trust a group that had arrived so suddenly, so decisively. "You're not with the Council?" Cain asked, his tone skeptical, still holding onto the data crystal like it was his lifeline. The woman shook her head, her expression hardening. "We're not with anyone. Not anymore." She stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the crystal in his hand. "My name is Ilara, and we need to talk. What you found, it's bigger than you realize. That message, it's the key to everything." Cain didn't reply immediately. Instead, he handed over the crystal, watching as she plugged it into a small device at her side. The hologram of Empress Solara flickered to life again, projecting the same commanding image as before. Ilara didn't flinch as the voice echoed through the open air. "We've been searching for you," Ilara muttered, her eyes narrowing. "The bloodline. It's not just about power. It's about a unification that has been lost for centuries. Earth's monarch was a symbol, a beacon for all of humanity." Cain's heart skipped a beat. "You mean I activated the signal?" His voice cracked slightly, the weight of that realization sinking in. "Not you, exactly," Ilara corrected, her voice soft but firm. "The message is a call to anyone who could be related to the royal bloodline. A descendant, the monarch's heir. That's you, Cain. The message wasn't just a relic, it's your inheritance." Cain blinked. "But I'm no monarch, I'm just a scavenger. A nobody." "That's where you're wrong," Ilara replied, her gaze intense. "You've been chosen, and whether you want it or not, this is bigger than you. Your family, your ancestors, ruled Earth. And with that lineage, you are the key to uniting humanity across the stars. Earth hasn't had a ruler in centuries, but now the galaxy is beginning to remember what we once were." Cain's head spun. He felt the gravity of the situation pressing down on him, but it was almost too much to bear. A scavenger, the descendant of a royal bloodline. How could this be real? He had spent years hunting for scraps, surviving day to day. The idea of leading a galaxy was as distant as the stars themselves. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Why would Earth's throne pass down to someone like me?" Ilara's expression softened for a brief moment. "Because your bloodline, however fractured, has never truly disappeared. Earth's monarchy was built on more than just wealth and power. It was about bringing together all human colonies, from the first settlements to the farthest reaches of space. Humanity isn't scattered across the galaxy by chance. We were meant to unite." Cain felt the weight of her words. "But Earth is dead. It's nothing more than a husk. I don't see how I can change that." Ilara gave him a stern look. "That's exactly why you can change it. Earth may be lost, but the people of Earth, our people, are still out there. You've been running from your past, Cain, but it's time to face it. You were born to lead, and the galaxy needs someone to take that mantle." The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. Cain wanted to argue, to deny the reality of it all, but deep down, a part of him could already feel the pull, the sense of responsibility. There was no turning back now. His ancestors' message had already set the wheels in motion, and enemies were closing in fast. Just then, the sky above them darkened. Cain's eyes widened as he turned his gaze upward. A fleet of ships, sleek and menacing, descended from the clouds, cutting through the atmosphere with precision. "Looks like we're not the only ones who've been paying attention," Ilara said, her voice filled with resolve. "Get ready, Cain. This is just the beginning." The air crackled with tension as Ilara and Cain stood on the dusty plains of Kethra, the ships overhead casting long, foreboding shadows. They weren't alone anymore. The fleet that had descended from the sky was like nothing Can had ever seen, a striking combination of sleek human warships and civilian transport vessels, their designs a blend of ancient Earth aesthetics and cutting-edge technology. Ilara's jaw tightened as the ships touched down. She didn't hesitate. We need to move. Now. Kian, still reeling from the shock of his newfound heritage, barely registered the command before Ilara was already moving toward the nearest ship. He had no choice but to follow, his feet scrambling over the rough terrain. Behind them, the mercenaries who had tried to capture them were regrouping, their communications crackling through the air. But Ilara was too fast, too prepared. The ship's hatch opened with a soft hiss, and they were ushered inside before the mercenaries could close in. Inside, the walls hummed with power, and Kian was struck by the mix of the futuristic and the ancient. The interior was stark, but meticulously crafted. Sleek consoles glowed with unfamiliar symbols, and a large holographic map flickered overhead, detailing the galaxy in a way Kian had never seen before. "This is where it all begins," Ilara said, her voice low as she moved toward the map. "The Starborn faction, this is our home base." Kian took in the sight of the map, an intricate network of human colonies and former strongholds stretching across the stars. There were sectors he didn't recognize, distant systems marked with symbols that hinted at old alliances. Earth had once ruled over it all. But now it was fractured, dispersed, and the factions that once served the Empire had splintered. A figure stepped into view, a tall man with piercing eyes and an aura of quiet authority. He was dressed in a dark, formal uniform, the emblem of a lion and stars stitched on his chest. Ilara turned toward him, nodding as he approached. "Commander Darius," she greeted him coolly. Darius gave her a sharp, almost curt nod. "We've received the signal." "It's real, then." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "It's real." The message was from Earth's last monarch, Solara. "Kian here is her heir." Kian felt his throat tighten. He couldn't get used to hearing that word, heir. The implications of it were staggering, and Ilara's words only deepened the weight of it. He was no politician, no ruler. He was a scavenger, a nobody. Yet somehow, he was being thrust into a conflict that spanned the entire galaxy. Darius, however, didn't seem to share his doubts. "This changes everything. The Council won't be pleased. They've done everything in their power to bury Earth's legacy. But now..." He glanced at Kian, his gaze lingering for a moment. "Now we have a chance to fight back." Ilara stepped forward, placing a hand on the console. "Not just fight back, unite. We need to reclaim humanity's place in the stars. We've been scattered, divided. But the monarchy was never just about one planet. It was a symbol, a unifying force that brought us all together. I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to follow the legacy of Earth. We can bring the colonies back into the fold, but only if we act quickly." Kian's head spun. His whole life, he had lived in the shadows, out of sight, scavenging to survive. But the galaxy was bigger than Kethra, bigger than he had ever imagined. And it seemed that now, it was looking to him for guidance. The ship's pilot, another figure clad in the same emblem, approached, a woman with a scar running down her cheek. "We've got company," she said, her voice grim. "Council ships, they're closing in. Looks like they found us faster than we anticipated." Ilara's expression hardened. "I was hoping for more time." Darius placed a hand on her shoulder. "We don't have time to waste. We'll have to fight, or we'll lose everything." "Agreed," Ilara replied, her eyes locked on Kian. "This is your first test. You may not want this, Kian, but it's the only way forward. We need you to lead, to rally the Starborn and the colonies. There's no turning back now." Kian swallowed hard, the weight of Ilara's words sinking in. "What do you need me to do?" "Prepare for battle," Ilara said, her voice steely. "We may not win today, but we'll send a message that the Monarch has returned." The ship's engines roared to life, and the stars outside the viewport blurred into a brilliant streak of light as they shot into the void. Kian had been thrust into a war he never asked for, but now, more than ever, it was clear that the fate of humanity's future rested on his shoulders. The battle was just beginning. The stars outside the viewport streaked by in a blur as the ship accelerated toward the distant fleet of Council warships. Kian's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands gripping the armrests of the seat in front of him. The weight of his newfound responsibility pressed down on him like an anvil, and he felt as though he were watching everything unfold from the sidelines, powerless to stop it. Ilara was already at the helm, her eyes sharp and focused as she spoke with the crew in clipped, efficient commands. The pilot, a woman named Kira, was busy monitoring the approaching Council ships, her hands moving across the holographic control panels with expert precision. "We don't have much time," Ilara muttered to herself, her fingers dancing across the interface, initiating battle protocols. "We'll need to buy time for the others to regroup. If the Starborn can't mobilize in time, this will all be over before it starts." Kian's heart raced. He barely understood half of what Ilara was saying, let alone how to help in any meaningful way. His world had always been small, survival on Kethra, scrounging for scraps, evading the dangers that lurked on every corner. But now, the galaxy itself felt like a beast on the verge of awakening, and Kian was expected to command it. "Kian," Ilara's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp and clear. "We need you up here. The crew will follow you if they believe in the cause. You've got the bloodline. Now it's time to prove you've got the will." He turned to her, his mind spinning. "I'm not a leader. I don't know how to fight a war. I'm just—" "Stop." Ilara's eyes softened for a brief moment. "You don't need to be a soldier. You need to be a symbol. That's what the Starborn are fighting for. Humanity has forgotten its roots, forgotten what made us strong. You're not here to command every ship, Kian. You're here to inspire them to remember what we once had." Kian stared at her, unsure if he could do what she was asking. But before he could respond, a loud, urgent alarm blared throughout the ship. Kira's voice rang out over the comms, tense and professional. "Council fleet is locking onto us. Weapons are hot. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The ship jolted as it veered to the left, the sudden movement throwing Kian against the restraints. He gritted his teeth and forced himself upright, stumbling toward the front of the ship. Through the viewport, the enemy fleet loomed, a dark, imposing force of warships, each bristling with weapons and shields. The Council had always maintained a stranglehold over humanity, and now it was clear they would not give up control without a fight. Ilara stood, her posture unwavering, as she gave her crew the order. "Prepare to engage. We'll hit them fast and hard. Kian, get to the communications console and broadcast our message. The whole galaxy needs to hear us." "Broadcast what?" Kian asked, panic rising in his chest. "I don't know how to do this." "You'll do it," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Just tell them the truth. The monarchy is returning. Earth's rightful heir is here. Humanity has a choice. Unite under one banner, or be torn apart." Kian nodded, though his hand shook as he approached the console. He had never been a public speaker, had never been thrust into a situation like this. But there was no time to doubt himself. His ancestors had ruled a galaxy once. The bloodline that flowed through his veins wasn't just a symbol, it was a rallying cry. He sat at the console, his fingers hesitating over the controls. The battle raged outside, laser fires streaking past their ship as they danced between the oncoming missiles. Kian's eyes flicked to Ilara, who nodded at him once more, her face a mask of calm determination. He pressed a button. The communication link was established. "People of the galaxy." Kian's voice boomed through the ship's speakers, strong but unsteady. "I am Kan, heir to the throne of Earth. For too long, humanity has been scattered, divided. For too long, we've let the Council dictate our fate. But now, the time has come for us to rise again. The monarchy will return, and we will unite under a single banner. His words felt hollow at first, a mere echo of his doubt. But as he spoke, he felt something inside him stir, something primal, something powerful. His family had once ruled this galaxy. The blood of Earth's greatest leaders ran through his veins, and though he wasn't sure of everything that lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. They couldn't afford to lose. "Join us," Kyan continued, his voice gaining strength. "The choice is yours. Stand with us, or be left behind." Outside, the battle intensified. The council ships were closing in, their weapons charging for another strike. But this time, Kyan wasn't just a spectator. He wasn't just running from his past. He was stepping into it. And for the first time in his life, Kyan felt the stirrings of something greater than himself, a force capable of shaping the galaxy's future. Kyan's message echoed through the void, cutting through the chaos of battle. The speakers crackled with static as his voice rang out across the galaxy, reaching colonies far beyond the reach of the Council's grasp. But as he finished speaking, a cold, uncomfortable silence filled the ship's cockpit. The ship jolted again, throwing him forward, and Kyan barely managed to steady himself. The Council fleet had launched another wave of attacks, their weapons crackling with deadly force. They weren't holding back now. If they couldn't stop Kyan's message, they would stop his ship. "We're taking hits," Kira shouted, her voice tight with panic. "Shields are weakening. We've got to get out of here, or we'll be sitting ducks." Ilara moved swiftly, her expression sharp as she moved between crew members. "Hold your ground. The Starborn are ready. Kyan, we need to broadcast to the fleet. Rally them now." Kyan's heart raced as he turned back to the communications console. His message had been sent, but the battle was far from over. The galaxy's future wasn't secured with words alone. It was earned with actions. And right now, Kyan had to make his actions count. He pressed another button, opening a direct link to the Starborn fleet. A holographic map appeared, showcasing their position amidst the larger battlefield. Kyan had no idea how many ships they had at their disposal, but it seemed like they were vastly outnumbered. The Council was relentless, but so were the people he now called allies. "Starborn forces," Kyan said, his voice steadying as he addressed the fleet. "I know many of you didn't choose this fight. I know many of you were only living your lives, trying to survive in a galaxy that had forgotten Earth's legacy. But the time has come to stand. We have a choice. We can continue to live in the shadows, or we can rise. Today we rise. For Earth, for humanity." His words surged with an energy that he hadn't expected. The tremors of fear and doubt that had filled him earlier began to dissipate, replaced with something fiercer. It wasn't just his bloodline he was defending. It was the future of every human being scattered across the galaxy, forgotten by the very powers that had once united them. "We may be small," he continued, "but we are not weak. The monarchy is returning, and Earth will once again be the heart of our people. Stand with us, or be left behind." A brief, breathless pause. Then the comms crackled to life again, this time with the voices of those who had joined his cause. We stand with you," came a voice, hoarse but determined. "For Earth. All ships, focus fire on the Council vessels," shouted another, a leader from a distant sector. "The Starborn won't fall today." Kyan's pulse quickened. There were more voices than he had expected, more support than he had dreamed possible. His message had ignited something powerful. Humanity was waking up. A sharp, crackling noise interrupted his thoughts. Kira's voice shot through the comms, panic in her tone. "We've got a Council destroyer targeting us. We're not going to make it unless we..." Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the ship, throwing everyone to the floor. Kyan's vision blurred as the shockwave hit, but he managed to grip the console, his mind still racing. "Report," Ilara barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're still alive," Kira said quickly, breathing heavily. "But we're losing power. Shields are almost down." Kian's mind raced. They needed a plan. Fast. He thought back to the map. The Starborn fleet had positioned itself strategically, but there was a gap in their defenses, one that, if exploited, could give them a chance to disable the Council's command ship. "We need to take out their flagship," Kian said, his voice calm despite the situation. "If we hit the heart of their command, we'll break their coordination. Ilara, can you get us in close enough?" She nodded, her eyes hardening with resolve. "We've got one shot at this." "Kira, set a course for their flagship's weak spot. We'll need full speed and precision." Kira didn't hesitate. On it. The ship lurched again as it veered toward the massive Council destroyer. The hull shuddered under fire, but Ilara's unshaken leadership kept them on course. The ship's engines roared as they closed the distance, the gleaming enemy flagship looming ahead like a dark monolith. "Get ready," Kian said, his heart pounding in his chest. This is it. A sudden realization washed over him. He wasn't just leading the Starborn. He wasn't just fighting for Earth's future. This battle would shape the very essence of humanity's destiny. The monarchy's return was no longer a distant dream. It was a reality. And Kian was at the forefront. The flagship was within firing range. The countdown began. "Now," Ilara shouted. The ship's weapons blazed to life, and the void between them and the Council destroyer erupted in blinding light. The ship's weapons blasted forward, the powerful surge of energy slamming into the Council flagship's shield with a resounding crack. For a split second, everything went quiet. Kian felt his heartbeat in his chest, the tension unbearable. Had they done it? Was this the turning point they'd been hoping for? Then the ship shuddered violently as the Council destroyer retaliated. A barrage of missiles rained down, detonating all around them, and the cockpit was filled with the shrill sound of alarms. The Starborn ship was rocked again, the hull creaking as it struggled to maintain stability. "We've got a breach," Kira shouted, her voice tight. "Hull integrity failing. We can't take much more of this." Kian's stomach twisted. They couldn't afford to lose their ship now, not with the battle so close. He turned to Ilara, who stood firm at the helm, her hands moving rapidly across the controls. "We need to disable their shields before they retaliate again," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Kira, can you get us into range for another strike?" "I'll do my best." Kira's hands flew over the controls, her face taut with concentration. The ship lurched again, but Kira didn't falter. They couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close to breaking the Council's grip. The Starborn ship darted through the battlefield with surprising agility, dodging the Council's retaliatory fire. From the viewport, Kian saw the might of the Council's fleet, a monstrous array of ships encircling the Starborn like predators closing in on prey. The Council wouldn't let them escape without a fight. But then something remarkable happened. The ships of the Starborn fleet, emboldened by Kian's message, surged forward. It wasn't just their coordinated attack. They were fighting with renewed purpose, as if they could feel the shift in momentum. His words had sparked something deep within them. The people of Earth's legacy were finally coming together, not as scattered colonies, but as a united force. "All ships, focus fire on the flagship's command center." A voice called over the comms, a commander from the Outer Rim. "We take their heart out. We take their control." The tide of battle shifted. The Council's destroyer now had multiple targets to contend with. As Kian watched, a string of explosions erupted along the flagship's side. Its shields flickered, the once impenetrable barrier weakening with each strike. "Now's our chance," Ilara yelled. "All power to the forward cannons. Kira, hit them with everything we've got." Kira didn't hesitate. Firing now. The ship's main cannons erupted in a blinding burst of energy, a final, concentrated blast of fire. Kian watched in a mixture of awe and disbelief as the Council flagship's shields finally collapsed under the sustained barrage. And then, with an enormous explosion, the flagship's command center erupted in flames, its core rupturing in a cascade of fiery destruction. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, the once dominant Council fleet now in disarray. The remaining ships hesitated, their commanders unsure of how to proceed without their central command. "We did it," Caen breathed, his voice barely audible. But there was no time for relief. The battle wasn't over. The Council's forces were still formidable, and their response would come swiftly. Ilara turned to Caen, her face set with a grim resolve. "This isn't the end, but it's a victory, and we need to seize it." Caen nodded, his mind racing. The battle had shifted in their favor, but the Council wouldn't take this loss lightly. They would regroup, and the fight would continue. But something had changed. The Starborn had found their rallying cry, their spark of hope. The galaxy was waking up to the reality of a united humanity, and the Council couldn't ignore that forever. "We've proven that Earth's hair is real," Ilara continued, her voice low. "But this war is far from over. Now we fight to keep what we've earned, and bring the galaxy together." Caen swallowed hard, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had led them into battle, but the true test was yet to come. The galaxy was fractured, divided by factions and old wounds. The war for unity had only just begun. Outside the viewport, the Starborn ships regrouped, their weapons still primed, their engines powering up for another assault. The Council had been dealt a blow, but the retaliation would be swift. Caen's hands clenched into fists as he looked out at the stars. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on him, but he also felt something else, a spark of determination. The monarchy's return had only just begun, and no matter the challenges ahead, Caen was ready to face them. Humanity's future depended on it. The aftermath of the battle felt both like a victory and a fleeting illusion. The Council's flagship had fallen, a massive blow to their leadership, but the war was far from over. The galaxy, still reeling from centuries of division, was not ready to embrace unity so easily, and Caen felt it, the weight of what he had set in motion pressing down on him with every passing moment. As the Starborn ships drifted through the scattered debris of the battlefield, Caen stood at the ship's command center, staring out into the void. The enemy fleet had begun retreating, but the shattered remnants of the Council's forces were already regrouping. They wouldn't give up easily. The Council had held power for far too long. "Ilara, what's the status?" Caen asked, his voice steady but heavy with uncertainty. "We've secured a temporary victory," Ilara replied, her face grim as she looked at the tactical display. "But the Council is not defeated yet. Their warlords are rallying their fleets. We've given them a reason to fear, but it's going to take more than a single battle to break their hold." Caen nodded, his thoughts racing. He had known this wasn't going to be easy. Even with the Starborn fleet now on the offensive, they were still vastly outnumbered by the Council's remaining forces. But one thing had changed, something fundamental. The idea of unity had taken root. It had sparked the flame of rebellion, and there were more and more systems beginning to rally behind Earth's heir. Caen could feel the pulse of something larger, something greater than himself. "The galaxy is waking up," Caen said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "But how do we unite all these factions? How do we bring them together when so many have been at each other's throats for centuries?" "You're not alone in this," Ilara said, her voice soft but strong. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "There are others out there. Leaders, visionaries who've been waiting for someone to take charge. You're their symbol, Caen, but you don't have to carry this burden alone." Caen turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. The idea of ruling, of leading the entire galaxy, still terrified him. But Ilara was right. He didn't have to do it alone. The Starborn were already a symbol of hope, a beacon for those tired of the Council's iron grip. The rebellion had grown beyond just a military force. It had become a movement. "Then let's make sure they know we're not backing down," Caen said, his voice hardening with resolve. The crew worked swiftly, preparing for the next phase of the war. The Starborn fleet was small, but it was unified. As long as Caen held on to that unity, there was hope. They were no longer scattered rebels. They were the foundation of a new order. In the days that followed, the battle for the galaxy's heart raged on. Kian's message continued to spread, echoing through the comms networks. As more and more systems joined the cause, the Starborn fleet grew in strength. The Council, for all its power, couldn't stamp out the growing movement. But even as the Starborn gained ground, Kian knew they couldn't rely on military strength alone. Unity wasn't just about ships and guns. It was about the hearts and minds of those who had been oppressed for so long. Kian knew that the war would have to be fought on every front: political, social, and cultural. The galaxy wasn't just fractured by the Council. It was fractured by centuries of history, suspicion, and mistrust. As the days turned to weeks, Kian made his way from one fleet to the next, speaking to leaders, diplomats, and civilians alike. His presence had become a symbol of hope, but it also drew the ire of the remaining Council warlords, who were preparing to strike back with everything they had. The final showdown was inevitable, but as Kian stood before the gathered leaders of the Starborn, he felt something shift deep within him. The burden of leadership was heavy, yes, but it was also an opportunity to shape the future. He wasn't just fighting for the past. He was fighting for the future of every human being who had been forgotten, abandoned, or oppressed. This was their chance to reclaim their destiny. "We're not just fighting to win," Kian said, addressing the assembled leaders. "We're fighting for a new era, one where we're no longer divided. We have a chance to unite the galaxy, to create something that's never existed before. Let's make sure we don't waste it." The room fell silent, and then, slowly, one by one, the leaders began to nod in agreement. The Starborn were no longer just a resistance. They were the future, and as the final battle loomed on the horizon, Kian knew that whatever happened, this was the beginning of something far greater than he could have imagined. The monarchy's return wasn't just about reclaiming power. It was about reawakening a galaxy that had long since forgotten its true potential. The stars were no longer distant, cold lights in the sky. They were beacons of hope, burning bright with the promise of unity.